She was so scared that she trembled all over when she saw the man's face in the house. After hesitating for a few seconds, she quickly ran to a nearby store to buy a hammer and hemp rope. When she was not paying attention, she knocked him unconscious and stuffed him into the trunk. After doing all this, Maya was already trembling with fear. Then she drove the car to a dense forest and pushed the man into a pit that had been dug long ago. She took out a pistol and wanted to shoot the man to death, but the man woke up at this time. Although Maya had an absolute advantage, she was still frightened by the man's eyes. "But I love you." The obedient man, Mr. Zhao, was begging bitterly, saying that his child was still waiting for him at home and hoped that Maya could let him go. The man's crying and crying were somewhat different from the devil in Maya's mind, but he would rather kill by mistake than let him go. But after struggling for a long time, the kindness in his heart still made him unable to do it. He had no choice but to stuff the man into the car again and took him home. Then he notified her husband. The two took advantage of the fact that there was no one around, lifted the man out of the car, tied him to a stool in the basement, and interrogated him. Maya asked him what his name was, where he was from, and whether he had participated in the war. The man answered honestly that his name was John and he was Swiss and had never participated in the war. Maya scolded him for being a liar who was full of lies, because even after 15 years, Maya could not forget John's evil eyes. But her husband was still moved when he saw John's pitiful appearance. She felt that the probability of this incident was too low. After all, how could people who met in the war 15 years ago meet in this small town across half the world? Faced with her husband's doubts, Maya was full of grievances and had nowhere to talk. She ran out of control and ran out of the basement. After Maya left, John lied that he wanted to go to the toilet, but when her husband brought it, she suddenly attacked and knocked her husband down. She also kicked her fiercely. Maya heard the noise and tried to lower the door to block it, but her strength was too weak. She fell to the ground and fell unconscious after being hit hard by John. John took the opportunity to run to the door, but the door was locked. She could only shout for help. Although John was stopped in time, their movements alarmed the neighbors around. In order not to arouse suspicion, Maya, who had just woken up, pretended to be woken up and walked out of the house. She also deliberately guided him that the sound might come from next door. The neighbor had to work tomorrow and didn't want to care too much, so he went back to the house. After this incident, the husband also realized that John was not simple, and planned to investigate his identity first before deciding whether to kill this man. Before leaving, he asked Maya not to act privately and must wait for him to come back. Maya agreed verbally, but as soon as her husband left, he went directly to the basement and emotionally broke down. He took off John's pants and took up the strong liquor and poured it into his mouth. These were all things John had done to him 15 years ago. Seeing that John was now pretending to be an innocent victim, Maya slapped him a few times in anger and cursed him in German as a gypsy. Suddenly Maya thought of something and asked John to say this German sentence to him. Seeing that John refused to say it, Maya picked up a hammer beside her. Hearing this horrible insult, Maya's thoughts returned to 15 years ago. In order to avoid the war, she and her sister were hiding in a Jewish concentration camp with a group of women, but they were discovered by a group of German soldiers not long after. The leader was John. They took away Maya's sister and rode on Maya, torturing them in ways that ordinary people could not imagine. Even after 15 years, Maya could not forget the pain. Her husband came back at night and checked the files. John was indeed Swiss and had never participated in the war. In order to further verify, her husband began to ask John for some details, such as which restaurant his middle school classmates loved to eat. John hesitated for a long time before reluctantly saying a few names. This made her husband suspicious. Just as he was about to ask again, there was a knock on the door. Maya looked through the window and found that it was the neighbor who came with the police. He took a few deep breaths before opening the door. Only then did Maya see clearly that there was a woman with the police. The police told Maya that the woman's husband suddenly disappeared 3 days ago, and the neighbor happened to hear someone calling for help last night. So when she came to verify, Maya realized that the woman's husband should be John. Just when she didn't know what to do, her husband came out of the basement and said the lines he had prepared in advance, successfully evading the police, but they also clearly understood. John couldn't be detained forever, and he had to find out whether he was a German soldier as soon as possible. Maya decided to take a risk and get the answer from John's wife. But who knew that the woman didn't know about John's past? Just when Maya thought she was going to return empty-handed, she suddenly saw the ring the woman was wearing, which actually had a Jewish symbol in it. The wife said that this was a gift from her husband when they got married. Maya suddenly thought of something and rushed to the basement immediately. Sure enough, she saw a ring on John's finger. Maya wanted to take it off, but John held it tightly. Maya was forced to cut off John's finger and took off the ring. Sure enough, there was a Jewish symbol inside, and this kind of ring. Only in the Jewish concentration camps of that year, Maya was basically sure that John was the German who invaded them. When her husband came back, Maya excitedly showed him the ring, but was slapped by her husband. He thought his wife was crazy and could be so cruel to find the truth. At this moment, Maya calmed down. These days, the two were almost broken by this matter, and they had to draw a stronghold for this matter as soon as possible. After discussion, the two drove to the forest and decided to interrogate John for the last time. Maya pointed a gun at John and threatened him that as long as he told the truth, he would let him go back to reunite with his wife and children, but if he said nothing, she would rather kill him by mistake than let him go. After several hours of coercion and inducement, John finally told the truth. He was indeed a German soldier, and the leader of the German army that violated Maya and killed Maya's sister that night. At this moment, John was repenting in a life-and-death situation, sincerely apologizing to Maya for the sins he committed that year, and his suspicions were answered affirmatively. Maya knelt on the ground with a weak body, not knowing how to deal with John. After all, he was now a father, and his wife and children were waiting for him at home. When she was hesitating, Maya was startled and looked back in disbelief to find that it was her husband who fired the gun. This was her first time to kill someone, and her hands were shaking. After the two of them calmed down, they hurriedly buried John in the pit. The husband calmly comforted his wife that everything was over.